Okay, let's welcome to the session. First of all, let's say thank you to all our sponsors which make this possible. IT Point, Scriptrunner, M365 Blog. So without this, we couldn't have events like this, just for free. And for now, I welcome you to the third session here, or the third cloud virtual summit here. And the topic here will be Azure AD, Graph, Exchange, and the combination here. Let's go through the agenda, what we're going to talk about. I'm going to split this a little bit. So the whole session will be, one side will be, the first part will be focused more on the admin side. How can I control OAuth apps, enterprise application, the own registered application, stuff like that. And then also a few tips also for developers itself. Just a few words to myself. My name is Ingo Gegenwart. I'm working for SAP, internal IT at SAP here. I'm Exchange 2010 master and also MVP for a few years right now. If you have any questions, whatever, you can follow me on Twitter, shoot me an email. Yeah. Actually, as you might have seen here, I'm coming from Exchange. Meanwhile, also moving in my job role here more towards Azure, and here also be part as a global admin. And every day we see this interaction coming from all the kind of the ecosystem from Azure. It all combines or comes down to Azure, to the enterprise applications and Exchange, and also SharePoint here. But now, one of the really severe, issues here we have seen in the last years, actually, it's becoming really more and more a threat, illicit consent. But in the end, what does this really mean, illicit consent? In fact, the attackers, meanwhile, they are got more, of course, more efficient. They learn. They also use automation. They use other cloud system, AWS, Google, Azure itself. And the key point here is also that the way we authenticate for services has changed. Now we're moving to OAuth, which means we get we do some authorization and authentication, and we get an access token for this. Means like a ticket. We just had a session here at Michaeli and about this, and in the end, we granting someone and delegating someone permission to act on behalf of us, a service who can access our resources, our data. Actually, could be something in SharePoint, in OneDrive, but also in the mailbox, right? And this is really, really getting more and more an issue, because you can have this also in a silent. Before it was attack, password and username, which was really obvious, and we could protect against these. But this is now something, you really want to have look at it, and make sure that you control this. Just to give you maybe just a short, let's say, stop presenting, just an idea. Let me share the screen, and let's look at this. Every user has to grant consent for an application to access its data. Even with multi-factor and whatever it is, if the user just grant consent, the application has access to it. And when we look at it, just here, short term, where is it? The user is going to trick you, or the attacker. If you look at this, let's look. This permission, this app, just as an idea here, this was registered in another tenant, whatever. It could be a multi-tenant. It looks like legit because you can see it's OneDrive. It says OneDrive. But in the end, if you really look at it, it's have full access to your calendar, and then read right to your email. The profile, of course, user read. This is one thing. And how can we protect our users from this? Because they most likely they just look at the picture and then they see, okay, that's fine, looks legit. So here's even a URL is in there, you know. I can click on that, you know, I get some information, I just grant access to it. That's it. From that point of view, there is the attacker would have access, yeah, to the whole calendar and the whole mailbox actually. And this is something what we're trying um, to protect the users from. So how can we do that actually? Just switch sharing. Sorry for that. The easiest way actually is as an admin. Yeah, we have some tenant-wide settings here. Come on. From the tenant-wide setting here, we can actually control how a user can consent to apps. And the first thing would be, you know, you want to disable the ability that the user can grant consent. The setting can be found here in your Azure AD in the user setting, and then you can toggle this yes or no. But be aware of, if you do so, the user can't grant consent. So you need to have a workflow for this actually, so they can have access to the application. Another thing is also not only the users, if group owners, they have also the ability for by their own the group, they can grant consent for the whole user. So even the user has not granted consent to it. An owner of a group can do that on behalf of this user, and this is also something which is might be forget to set here. This can be controlled here in a limited way, or yes or no, turn on and off. The next thing is actually, which just comes, which is really also not only for security, this is also just as a life cycle. To disable the ability of registration application. Out of the box, every user can just register an application in your tenant. So depending on your company and on your users, if they are a developer and you have a lot of developers, for instance, they would register over and over again a lot of applications and they will show up. And they could register also these applications as multi-tenant applications, which then are visible maybe to other tenants. And you want to stay on top of this because otherwise you have a whole bunch of applications and this is totally running out of control actually for you. And you can control this as well, the aperture threshold. But again, here is the same thing. If you disable this, you have to find a way, a life cycle, so that users, yeah, are able to register application and work for them. You know, not only registering, but also maybe setting the permission, the claims, and stuff like that. So the next thing is now publisher verification. I'm not sure if you already heard about this. This is something which was now last year introduced by Microsoft and enforced right now. So that means every um, publisher, every user or a company needs to verify that there are in the ecosystem or from Microsoft a verified publisher. They have to go through a specific process, and you can verify then that you are legit user. And the reason, I think, the most likely the reason behind this is not that everybody just can spin up a tenant, a demo or a test tenant, which is a multi-tenant application, and then harvest other users and chasing attack those tenants and those users. This is something which is now introduced, and that means this is a like a combination. Let me share this here. When you go to your Azure AD and the enterprise application, then there is something here like consent and app permission. So Here you would register by default. It was something like this in the old tenants. In the new tenants, it's turned on automatically. Now the default would be allow user consent for app. You can say, okay, do not allow user the consent at all for the enterprise application here. But when you click here on this, allow user consent for verified publisher, you can define even for enterprise application, which are not, that user can actually consent to these kind of application if they are verified and if the permission are listed here, then they can grant consent. So, I mean, this is something also like to find the balance. If you block everything, you will have a lot of work, a lot of the help desk would be maybe flooded about this with requests here. And here you have to find the balance actually. And this is something where you can use it and fine tune. Also be aware of you have to be very careful. There are a lot of applications, even third party, even large vendors, worldwide vendors there, and they have not yet verified their apps actually. An app verification can be done actually when you look at one of the app registration here. This is in on between the application I mentioned here before, where I just uploaded the logo for OneDrive. Publisher verification can be done here. And of course, first you have to update the domain. So it has to be a registered domain of your tenant, and then you have a partner network ID. Once you have this in, you will see then also there is the app showing that this is verified. So make sure also one thing is this is if it's not turned on by default or the first time, then it gives you this as a hint that the user read, offline access, OpenID, profile, and email. Be aware, this is not. I also came across the issue. There was one of the permission was missing. Then it will still kick in, and the users will see need admin consent, so they won't be able to consent to these kind of apps. So we had this conditional access. Of course, everything or whenever it comes now to OAuth there, you can also use leverage and conditional access. But if you want to use, for instance, or create a conditional access policy of one of your own applications and apps there, and you can't find them, again, this is something, in the picker for conditional access, you have to use or just use the app ID, which is the unique identifier from the application, and it will show up, it will be shown there. There's only one thing what you also need to be aware of. If you have or create a conditional access policy for an application, this will cover all the delegated permissions. I'm coming to this later on. What is delegated? What is application permission? Delegated is actually something where always a user is involved on behalf of the user. Application permission, there's never a user involved. It's only client secret or a certificate is used for acquiring an access token. And again, there's only application there, no user. And application is, as of today, is not supported. So if you have an application there or a user and which has an application registered and using then application permission, they can still have access, and conditional access will not kick in here for these kind of requests. Cloud, and this is something here, what I just mentioned here. If you look for some of the applications, add the ID in, and then it will show up. Otherwise, it just shows up. I think it's the first 50 apps, most used apps here in a tenant. and yeah, your own apps most likely not shown up. Now coming maybe to a different topic here, Microsoft Cloud App Security. I know this definitely needs or is a license is required, so it costs. Yeah, but it gives you really a good overview and really alerts, alerting you for OAuth permissions, OAuth apps. So you have a lot of built-in application or alerts. You just have to enable them. Let me show this. This is something here. Um, just need to sign in again. If you have not seen the MCAS, just go to the portal of your Cloud App Security. And when you go here to control and then policies, and then there's a lot of policies already available. And this is also more and more getting more and more filled. And when you just look for OAuth, you will find these kind of alerts already built in. You just have to enable them. Something like risky OAuth apps, malicious OAuth app consent, suspicious stuff like this. This is something which is really useful and it helps to understand, also get a good understanding also what's going on in your environment. And if an alert is kicked in, you can also have it automatically then build your own policies and have it blocked, or also for the users have the app actually blocked, the users revoked. You can build some alerts out of it from this. I'm using the MCAS actually. Here are also the screenshots here. I just talked about configure the publisher domain of the application. Did you really of your domains? That's something you definitely have to should use. Here we can see it. This is the demo app, what I have mentioned here, where you configure the publisher verification for this feature. So now maybe just the understanding what is the service principal and what is an application actually. There are two objects which is represented in your Azure AD. The service principal itself, it's also called the enterprise application, could be only an application in your own tenant, but this also represents an application in another tenant. So the service principal is visible in your tenant for a multi-tenant application as soon as the first user consent to this application. So it means if you have tenant A and tenant B, and tenant A has a service principal published as a multi-tenant application, and in tenant B, the first user consent to this application, at that point in time, it will show up in your tenant. Before, it's not there. It's not listed. So that means if you spin up right now a new tenant, you will see there's a very few service principal enterprise applications in your tenant. So these objects represent application in your own and in other tenants, whereas the application itself, this is something which is registered in your tenant and this is visible only to you. And what you can do here, in the end, it's the configuration that makes the difference here. Have a look here, enterprise applications. When I look here at this app, I can have the properties, means, I can just enable it here for sign in. Yes, I know, turn it on. Let's go to the application itself. The difference here, here I do the branding. I can do the authentication, means how the app is used for the OAuth flow, which flow can be used for authentication. I have here control about client flow, means you have either a shared secret or a certificate. I can configure the API permission, which are needed here. I can expose it, app roles, owner, stuff like this. Whereas in the enterprise application itself, I can define an owner, but here this is the owner in the tenant. Maybe you want to have someone responsible for this particular enterprise application, so you do this here. You can also on permission grant here admin consent, or you can check, who granted consent on this here on this app, for instance. You, user and groups where it's assigned to, because here you can also control, is this visible for your end users, yes or no, and is the assignment requirement yes or no. So that means even if I use the user assignment, I make sure, or I tick here, flip this to here, that user assignment is required, I have to assign the app to the users. And even if the user, sees the app and is enabled, if it's not assigned to the app, they cannot use this app. This will be mentioned later on. These are the configuration itself, the difference between the enterprise application and the application itself. Just a recap. Delegated versus application permission. As I mentioned before, you can have all kind of, delegated permission is always there a combination or on behalf of a user. There's always a user involved, and also in the properties of the JWT, the bearer token, you will find user information, also the tenant information, stuff like this. Application permission, they're only application, and there are listed with the tenant. There's no user, never ever. The effective permission, as you can see here, it's only application permission. It's what the app has. And when it comes to a delegated permission, even if I have a user and he has token with a directory read write all error, they won't be able to delete or modify every object in the tenant. The thing is here, it's always in the context of the user. It also depends on the role in the tenant or in the workload, like Exchange, or in SharePoint. If the user has a specific role also assigned to or not. This is also listed here, and I have also in the slide decks. Also in the notes here, we'll find there also some links and some YouTube stuff there, also from Azure AD team, which is really recommended to have a look at. Now coming to the topic, Exchange itself. There are two main Exchange protocols which are currently used there for accessing mailboxes and managing mailboxes as well. Here is the Exchange Web Services. It's a long existing protocol. There's an API. You can install for installation DLLs, or you just craft your own SOAP request there and interact with the endpoints here. You have the full functionality in terms when you're trying to access the mailbox. If you want to maintain items and or work with items in the mailbox, doesn't matter if these are mail or calendar items. And also the configuration of the mailbox it's possible. There's a lot of permission. You can set permission. You can have some delegates. You can read the delegate settings. You can modify the delegate settings there. You can maintain permission for the whole mailbox, also for a folder. That's something what you can do with EWS. REST actually, it's relative young, but it's anyways it's a relative young protocol for Exchange here, but it's an OData 4 and JSON formatted, and it's optimized here because, as mentioned in another session today here already, You have your calls and only a subset of properties are returned. And even so, you have then also, you have to do some paging. If by default, only the first 1,000 items are returned. If you have, yeah, you can increase the page, the response size actually, but you have to go through all the pages to get them. And this is optimized for short, quick calls and response here. Of course, and it supports only OAuth, the REST protocol. And you don't have the full functionality like what you have in AWS. Nevertheless, there are a lot of vendors which have AWS still in place for their functionality. Yeah. Meanwhile, I think most of them are really moving towards REST, also just because of the fact that throttling kicks in. If you use AWS, there are still some other mechanism within Exchange here which throttles you. Nevertheless, there are some which have this also a lot of topics here in common: Exchange Web Services and the rest. AWS also supports OAuth there, but here are maybe the major things what you really need to be aware of. Microsoft Graph, there are 2 endpoints actually. Currently for mailboxes here, it's the graph.microsoft.com and Outlook Office 365.com actually. One major thing is here, AWS is not supported for the endpoint graph. So you have to go directly to Outlook Office 365.com. IMAP as well, EAS, yeah. But anyways, these are something, yeah, they meanwhile support also OAuth, but they're not, you're not interacting with the endpoint graph. You're always interacting with the endpoint Outlook Office 365.com. The list of difference between those 2 endpoints are there listed. Another thing is when you're using REST, not AWS. I'm not talking about AWS. I'm not talking about IMAP, stuff like this. Outlook, REST, this was the first, and even for on-prem, it's still available, but it's a limited functionality. If you're using Exchange 2016, 2019, it is available, the REST endpoint, but Microsoft will deprecate, or this is deprecated, and this will be retired. Yeah. Bear this in mind. It's until November 22. It's still some time, but you know, if you just start building up your application right now, use the Graph endpoint and not the Outlook for this. Maybe also some tips here for the. I'm just talking about the access token. Maybe something I can show you here directly. Maybe you just have seen. I don't know, not here. Let me acquire an access token. And so we have the difference there between a user and or a delegated and an application access token. What you can see here is I just used PowerShell here, some of the function here, and we can see here this is the bearer access token, and this decoded actually. It shows here the audience. We know that the issuing instance, what it was, these kind here are the when it was created and when it was and when it's going to be expired. The app ID, we have here the information, something like this, and we have here, as this is an application permission, we have roles. And let me just paste this in. You don't have to use this one. You can also just use something like GW for not sure if you already know this. Here for decoding, I just pasted in here, and we have the decoded code token itself. But what is very comfortable here is you can just click on claims. So you can see here audience. You can see the issues, what I mentioned here, also in information, what it is, what it means here, and we can see here all the information. Yeah, and also roles. So we'll look at this right now as we are talking here about an application permission. And the main differences, and this is hopefully now getting clearer, to delegated permission is this one. We just grab the token here. So when we look now, it's the same application here. But this is now an app. Yeah, no, it's actually it was not. No, it's a different application, but almost the same information here. What is given, but now we have more information. We know that here is a user is used, the immutable ID stuff like this, and we have here not roles. We have scopes. These are the actual permission the user can or this token has it now. This is the main difference, and you always have to bear in mind. And this is also for troubleshooting, because this is also something what I have on my daily work. Users or developers, they complaining about, hey, we have this app registered there. They're trying to access a shared mailbox or user's mailbox there. It's not working. And first of all, first thing actually is get an access token, what they acquired, if it's already failing, then and then they're doing something wrong there on this end anyways. But this gives you an idea what kind of permission they request and if this is working at all. So yeah, this is also here in the slides. You can have a look. So most of them think now, okay, I got my access token and that's it. I can access the mailbox and can send on behalf of any users and stuff like this and do whatever I want to do. This is wrong. And I think this is something what are really missing here also in the documentation. If you have the access token, that's just like it's something like a registration or like a ticket. Yeah, I'm authenticated. I'm authorized for this endpoint. But then think about this. When it comes to Exchange, then there is Exchange, and Exchange is also something like they do also a check. So that means if you want to access someone's calendar, you still need permission to do that. If you full access is not granted out of the box, send as permission, it needs also a delegate, send on behalf, stuff like this. This still needs to be configured in Exchange, or the user can, add the other person there as a delegate or set the folder permission. But this still needs to be done, and most of them, or most of the time, it is forgotten. Application permission is here a complete different topic. That's something, yeah, I just also want to highlight here. OAuth application permission is nothing like what we have in for Exchange. Within Exchange, there is for EWS, is also application impersonation, something mentioned. This is namely used that a certain in the past, we had a server's account and you granted an application impersonation for a specific, and you could scope this to a subset of users. But in the end, this server's account was able to impersonate the users within Exchange. OAuth application permission, as I just mentioned, there is no user. There is nothing, and that's per default. That means it can impersonate, or it has application permission. Yeah, it can impersonate the users all the time. And this is also something really, really I want to highlight. The X anchor mailbox header. It's an HTTP header. This is in most cases, even Microsoft by itself, in some products there, they forgot and they forgot to add this actually, and this causes then also some issues. The X anchor mailbox header, when you're talking to Exchange and you're using EWS, the same as REST, also always good idea to add this. It's not only a good idea, it's a requirement. You should add this so it's routed to the correct server itself. And when you're using EWS, even with OAuth, doesn't matter. You need to also, it's not an HTTP header that's in the SOAP request. And when you're doing the SOAP request for EWS, it's a part where you have to just edit the exchange impersonation. If this is missing, you're failing and you're getting an error for this. So now the question is, how can we restrict applications actually when it comes to Exchange Online? Yeah, as we just have seen, you can do this with conditional access rules, but only when it comes to delegate permission. We could also use the Microsoft Cloud App Security, so only in combination with conditional access. What is new is application access policies. So that means if you have an application which uses only application permission, per default have access to this application has access to every mailbox. If you grant mail read write, they could this application could modify and create do all the operation where mail read write is required. So this can be scoped within Exchange Online, and this is something only in Exchange Online with an application access policy, what it's called. So here we have an example, and this is most likely, yeah, because also we run into that. Yeah, we have an HR app, yeah, which should be used only for a subset of users. So how can we achieve this actually? There are several ways you can do that. One thing is we configure the service principal in Azure AD. What I mentioned before, this is where I go on the in the application in the enterprise application. I'm here in the enterprise application. I toggle here to user assignment required and then configure it on the user and groups. I need to assign it to these kind or to the users. Then they can use this the application. Another way would be create an application policy in Exchange Online. With this this exists only in Exchange Online. You can create an application access policy. This is what I did here, for instance. So I have the identity. I know I have the application ID, and this app can have only access, because I said here restrict access only to Megan B's Megan Bowen's mailbox. So even if I try to get an access token and try to access someone else's mailbox, it won't be available. It won't be possible. And one thing here is before there were only a few permissions supported, and we ask for this now for almost 2 years, 1.5 years, since February this year. These kind of application access policy also support EWS. Finally, I think the reason is the pressure was too much to Microsoft. Because so many vendors, they have their solution is built on EWS, and users, they don't want to grant maybe the permission, or that there was still the need to scope it, and finally they introduced it. Just a quick wrap up here. We have tenant wide configuration for illicit consent grants, configuration the end users. Also we learned something about conditional access and MCAS. Maybe the difference between service principal, application configuration, and from Exchange Online perspective, EWS REST protocol and the client access rule, and some information about the token here. And I also have some other tools here, what you can, or some other links here, what you can use here. Maybe one thing, let me show you also one thing. I'm not sure if you're aware of, let's use Postman. We had this again in a previous session. I also have, for instance, my environment here. And there's also the Office environment. And here I just configured, not sure if you notice, or let's say the Office installation or click to run installation is using this application. So we're talking here about delegated permission, right? And even if you look, this is all the information what you just need. And when you look at, let's see here, where is the access calendar? If you just would now add an permission for directory read all write, this is something which is actually would need read all. Yeah, this would need actually admin consent, and you would need to grant also admin consent for this. Just out of Sarker, you can use this, for instance, and get a new access token. Okay, and when I look at this token, everybody can use this. You will see that there is a lot of information, a lot of permission are listed. Audit log read all, calendars read write, calendars read shared, stuff. And also we have group read all, which is also something which is actually needs admin consent, stuff like this. If you wanted to start using Graph, you can use Postman and you can use this, and then you can just use this for authentication, and it's just available, and you don't need to be worried about let's say a verified publisher or admin consent, because this is already done in the background there by Microsoft. Yeah, with this, actually, I'm through of my presentation. Are there any questions? I was maybe a little bit too fast. If not, I'm still here around. You can ping me directly. Okay, Hans. Thank you. See you in your session there. So then I would say enjoy the rest of the other sessions. And